In 2016, the UK voted to leave the European Union. It was a shock that few people saw coming. Even Vote Leave had played down their chances of winning. The problem was that no one really had a plan about what to do next. The Prime Minister David Cameron had been so confident of winning, he told the civil service not to make any plans for the eventuality of leaving the EU. After losing the vote, he promptly resigned. Brexit was now someone else's problem. But the day after the referendum, two leading figures in the Vote Leave campaign, Michael Gove and Boris Johnson, appeared subdued, almost uncertain about what came next. Before 2016, Eurosceptics would talk in admiring terms of Norway and Switzerland, countries outside the European Union, but with most of the economic benefits. No wonder Brexit looked attractive. Take back control, but keep all the benefits of a single market. However, after the unexpected referendum win, the models of Norway and Switzerland were no longer enough. To many, Brexit now meant leaving the single market, the customs union, Erasmus, Horizon, and this hard Brexit was supported by a lot of the British press. The problem is that after the simplicity of a campaign to leave the EU, the question of what came next was surprisingly tricky. The UK got used to special deals. EU membership, but exemptions on the euro, exemptions on Schengen, and even a financial rebate. But it soon became apparent that if you leave the European Union, you can't have your cake and eat it. The UK had hoped it would be able to appeal directly to national governments, e.g. special access for German car exporters to the lucrative UK market. But it didn't work like that. The EU retained a disciplined approach. The four freedoms of movement, trade, capital, services and people. This was not up for negotiation. And the UK was faced with a series of undesirable trade-offs that no one really liked or expected. Concerned about the difficulties of passing a Brexit bill, the Prime Minister, Theresa May, called a general election, confident she could get a big majority, making it easier to get a Brexit bill through Parliament. There was another shock result as the Conservatives lost their majority, leaving them relying on a coalition with Ulster Unionists. But after months of hard negotiation, in 2019, Theresa May brought her Brexit bill to Parliament, who then promptly rejected it. It was the biggest government loss on record. Parliament then tried many different variations on the same theme: a customs union, a common market 2.0, a second referendum, but nothing could get a majority. It was easy to say what was unacceptable, but it's difficult to agree on a viable option. The referendum was very simple, but negotiating an acceptable deal much more difficult. Of course, there was another factor at play. Many Brexiteers in the UK had hoped that if the UK left the EU, it would start a domino effect, encouraging other countries to follow suit. But with political parties across Europe tempted by Euroscepticism, there was very little incentive for the European Union to reward leaving the European Union. The UK would definitely not get special concessions, which made it more attractive for other countries. And the chaos and perceived costs of Brexit were remarkably effective in shoring up support for the European Union across the continent. In the UK, Brexit has become steadily more unpopular. Support for rejoining steadily grows each year. And one of the main reasons is simply demographics. In 2023, over 65 supported Brexit by a majority of 56 to 36%. But for those aged 18 to 24, support for Brexit is only 7%, as opposed to 70% against. So over time, Brexit support dwindles, and new voters see little incentive to embrace Brexit. What about the economic costs of Brexit? In the immediate aftermath of a Brexit vote in 2016, the pound fell 13% and has remained weak ever since. This reflects markets' lower expectations about prospects for the UK economy. This depreciation in the pound pushed up import prices, especially for food and energy, and this has been exacerbated in recent years by the high inflation we've seen. Whilst this is a clear cost, the worst forecasts of immediate economic doom were also wide of the mark. The vote itself actually changed little economic fundamentals. Even leaving the single market in 2021 didn't precipitate a recession or anything like that. Since 2016, using purchasing power parity, economic growth of the UK has remained relatively similar to the Eurozone. In fact, the whole European continent has fallen behind the US. However, there have been very real economic costs of Brexit, and these will be increasingly felt over the next few years. Firstly, there's been a decline in trade openness, an increase in bureaucracy and custom declarations, something that has particularly hurt small and medium-sized firms. The British Chambers of Commerce found that 92% report significant challenges with a new trading deal. 80% of firms face higher import costs, causing some firms to go out of business. Business investment slumped post-2016 due to all the costs of trade and also uncertainties. 69% of farmers say Brexit has been bad for business. Numerous studies suggest that Brexit will be a net loss of GDP of around 4 to 5%. This is reducing average growth rates by around 0.2–0.3% a year, which on its own is not particularly noticeable. But over 10–15 years, it means the economy will be around £2,500 per person smaller than without Brexit. And this is not a loss that UK voters are keen to accept, especially in the current difficult economic climate. And there's still more to come, because in 2024, UK firms will face a new raft of costs associated with Brexit. If Brexit had occurred during a long economic boom, the costs may not have been particularly noticeable. But unfortunately for Brexiteers, it's coincided with a period of stagnant real wages, record inflation, and a general economic malaise. The economy was already vulnerable to the shocks and uncertainties that Brexit created. Since 2016, the UK has seen wage growth of around 0%, one of the worst in the developed world. Also, one of the motivations of Brexit was to end free movement of labour. In the preceding years, there had been high levels of net migration from Eastern Europe, with Eastern European workers attracted by higher wages in the UK. Since Brexit, net migration from Europe has fallen close to zero, but overall net migration has ironically surged to record levels, recently revised to 700,000 for the last year. And this is because net migration from non-EU countries has soared beyond many people's expectations. But also, there's another interesting feature worth mentioning. In the early 2000s, Polish wages were around 3 times less than UK wages, so no wonder there was a pressure for economic migration. But on current trends, Polish wages could catch up with UK wages by the late 2030s. And even if they don't quite catch up, the huge disparities which fed economic migration will definitely dissipate over time. Free movement within Europe will be less problematic in the future. Perhaps it will be British workers wanting to go and work in other parts of Europe. But the problem is that even if the UK indicated an interest in rejoining, the EU would be very wary, given all the difficulties they've had in recent years. Also, even if a new generation did like the idea of rejoining the EU, it would probably be a less attractive deal than in the past. The UK would struggle to regain its previous favourable concessions, and in theory would have to commit to joining the euro, something that would make it less attractive. The whole issue of Ireland has also added extra complexities to the issue. It's something that didn't really come up in the referendum. But the problem is that with a hard Brexit, in theory there's a hard border and checks between Northern Ireland, part of the UK, and the Republic of Ireland. And this threatened to undermine all the good work of the Good Friday Agreement, which brought better relations between the UK and Ireland. The frustrations of Brexit have the potential to change another constitutional issue. With the UK outside the European Union, it does make a united Ireland more attractive. Brexit also heightened tensions between Scotland and Westminster. Scotland voted to remain, and the push for a hard Brexit only strengthened independence sentiment. Brexit has thankfully become less divisive over time as the issue slips behind other issues like the cost of living crisis. But it does highlight the difficulty of solving complex constitutional issues with a simple majority referendum, especially when the deal is very uncertain. Nearly 7 years since the vote, there's very little enthusiasm for Brexit, and a sense that the same problems we had in 2016 still need solving. It remains a cautionary tale for other European countries. Still, perhaps the worst is over, and in recent years there have been signs of better relations between the UK and Europe. But could the UK ever rejoin? At least for the foreseeable future, it's very unlikely. But we could start to see greater cooperation and perhaps tentatively thinking about rejoining the customs union and single market. This video goes into more detail about the different options the UK has.